Hello, my name is Justin Bright and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. So last time we did a lot of work with Johnny Flores, that intrepid man of danger who has been terribly abused by my awful piloting skills. But we are managing to, not kill him yet. We've gotten a suborbital contract finished, which was terrifying, and probably not going to do that again. Probably stick to the Supersonic contract, but we'll see what we wind up with. I've got a new design of the X-15 coming up that I'm really excited to share, and hopefully it is not as terrible. We got lunar orbit finished, so we have a probe around the moon just sending back buckets of science, which is really going to allow us to accelerate our program and get some new technology. We've been spending a lot of time on the same tech. I'm looking forward to making rapid advancements. So yeah, that's what we have to look forward to. Let's get right to it. All right, successful contract means we get a little bit more money to spend on science and VAB. Definitely not spaceplane hangar because I should not be trusted flying planes. Thankfully, our time with planes is coming to an end. So I can get a good 42,600 funds every time that I fly this suborbital flight contract. And the X-plane contract also gain some money over time. Like this is actually... Wow, that's actually really worth a lot. Yeah, I'll fly for that one for sure. Yeah, so I think we're definitely not going to push any further than that. And honestly, just doing the X-Plane High contract is probably as far as I should go. I just don't think my design is very good. And it's something that I could spend time improving, or I could just focus on rockets, which I enjoy more anyways. All right, so 1959 to 1960 solid rocket engines completed. So that gets us basically one thing. So there's a large separation motor, which is going to be useful later on, but definitely not something I need right now. But the one that I've been looking for is the Altair X-248, which is the historical Thor burner stage, as they call it. It was the solid rocket that was used on the end of the Thor Able. So the Able put it up basically into orbit, and then this was the kick stage that got it to whatever point it wanted to be. So yeah, I'm looking forward to testing this against the GCRC to see if there's any additional benefit. That also unlocked the ability for us to, at some later time, get the Minuteman short-range missile and the Altair 2, so an improvement to the Altair booster. And also a technology upgrade of solid rocket engines. I don't actually know what that means, but that sounds pretty exciting. So yeah, that's what lies in wait for us in 1962. The nice thing about solids is that they are relatively cheap, both in terms of like actual cost to build. There's no tooling, their failure rate is low, and their research nodes are incredibly cheap. So that's a pretty cool thing to use. We've also gotten another 30 science from our lunar orbiting probe, which is just so good, which means that we can now do, let's see, we could unlock the human spaceflight electronics, which is one of the last things that is, actually this does not block basic capsules at all. We need crew survivability here, 22 points. And then we need human rated EDL. So we need a total of 44 points to make that happen. Yeah, I don't see any reason why not to do that. We've got, there's lots of good science and other stuff that is locked behind the early human spaceflight electronics research, but I think that we should probably find a way to stop me from doing more spaceplane stuff, and getting to capsules as fast as we can sounds about right. I would love to be developing our manned space program simultaneously with the unmanned stuff. So let's get that moving, and that means human rated EDL is next. Oh no! I was about to start my spiel of, what this rocket is, but instead we had an ignition failure on the S3D. That is a bummer. All right, here on the pad, we have a Thor Able bearing the Returner 1 biosatellite heading up to low Earth orbit in 3, 2, 1. Engage autopilot and ignition. Liftoff of the Returner 1. All right, so yeah, we had a ignition failure on the S3D on the previous launch, which is a darn shame, but we rolled it back, got it fixed in the VAB, and sent it right back out. So no problem there. All right, so this is a fairly typical Thor Able launch that we are sending up, but the difference is in the payload. So when there isn't so much rocket down here, we will talk more about that. I've found that you can actually time warp, do 4x physical time warp on certain payloads that don't require a lot of like, it's not really dicey whether or not this is going to make it into orbit. This is going to make it into this orbit just fine. This is actually not using most of the capabilities of this rocket, but it will burn this whole first stage down and then you know, circularize pretty easily. So you can time warp and it's not that big of a deal. Gets me through it a little bit faster anyways. Ooh, we are cooking. Oh man. That actually got a little toasty. See, that's some of the stuff that happens when you use when you time warp in orbit. So yeah, I'm gonna let it get up a little bit further before I kick off this stage, because something that because MechJeb PVG does not care about atmosphere. It doesn't know that it exists, so it will stage this off and then start tumbling wildly through the atmosphere. All right, we're high enough, so we stage off our Thor launch vehicle. And here we have our Able stage bearing the Returner satellite. So this is kind of a weird configuration that I put together that will be able to, hopefully, accomplish the Advanced Biological Capsule experiment. But first, we actually have to get this into orbit. Before I waste too much time talking about that, we're going to see if we hit the, we roll a 1, basically. All right, just 6 seconds until the end of our coast phase. We are ulging up, and there we go. All right, fantastic. Yeah, so this is a purpose-built payload that is intended to do 2 things. First, it's going to get us a whole bunch of science because we have the Advanced Biological Capsule up on the end of this thing. So this, in low Earth space, should get us 40 science, which is going to be just fantastic. So we can actually get that started now because we have reached the low orbit environment. So even as we circularize, we should get that started. This just has batteries. There's no solar panels or anything else. This is also intended to just spend 1 day in orbit and then come right back down to get us the reach orbital speed and return safely to Earth contract. So we've already reached the speed that we need to. Like, this is a very odd way of defining having been in orbit and then come back down from orbit. We actually need to have an altitude above 150 kilometers. Yeah, I wonder if that'll work. So I just put it in that I want a 155 kilometer periapsis. Yeah, there we go. Looks like we've got that, so that's fine now. So hopefully it still actually gets into orbit and doesn't freak out too much. But yeah, this Able stage had a ton of extra delta V for this burn. Yeah, so this is a really weird purpose-built satellite, and we'll talk more about how I've constructed that, but it's built around the static science sample return capsule and sample return command module parts, which are incredibly handy. And I spent a really long time trying to build a very complicated thing involving like when and where you had avionics and that whole thing, but then I found these parts, and then, you know, it just kind of worked itself out pretty easily. So let's go ahead and stage off our Able upper stage. There we go. and you'll see that we are now locked with our avionics. So this part here acts as a near Earth avionics core, I believe. It has control of 150 kilograms, which is enough to run the bottom part of this, which is going to get it out of orbit and then control its descent, but not enough to control the advanced biological capsule that I've put on the end here. So what I've basically done is I've set it up so that it can now sit in this orbit for 24 hours, because that is how long it's going to take to do this science. All right, so I've put a 24-hour timer on the Returner 1, and we will visit it when that is up and see how things are going. All right, so we have finished the biological sample experiment, and we have 4 more hours of power on this vessel. So I think we can safely come around to the light side of Earth. There we go, and then we can now begin our descent. All right, so as I mentioned, this has a advanced biological capsule experiment on the end here. That's pretty similar to all the different animals in space experiments that were done. So over the years, there were a lot of different small creatures from, bacteria and microbes all the way up to, mice, dogs, monkeys, all sorts of things were sent up into orbit to test how the orbital environment would how different biological creatures would survive the orbital environment, because we weren't entirely certain that things would survive or people would survive at all. We thought maybe it would kill us all as soon as we got up there. Like maybe there was just something that was fundamentally incompatible. But that's what these tests were done to try to check on. I was mostly inspired by the biosatellite, once again another incredibly creatively named experiment, the biosatellite program that the United States launched in the late 1960s. They were very different than these ones. They were much longer term, or at least intended to be, and the reason why I know about them and why they come to mind so easily is that in another game called Buzz Aldrin's Space Program Manager, that is one of the missions that you can run. And it's a really cool game, and it includes a lot of details about the historical actual missions that you're running in that game. But yeah, I always think about that as one of the early milestones of the space program, because it's focused, just like this is, on the space race between the US and the Soviets. But that was one of the things that you could do to get a whole bunch of prestige. And so I think about that a lot. Yeah, so I've just got inside this capsule just a big pile of batteries that are now just about empty, but that should not be a problem. What we want to do is transfer all of our data here, and there we go. I just clicked that, and you'll see that the camera shifted just slightly because data actually has mass. So we have one 10-kilogram biological sample 2 from Earth Space Low sample inside the return capsule. So that's fantastic. So this is done and should be empty. Yep, 0 samples, 0.0 samples, and it's been passed along. Yeah, so that is it, and we no longer need the actual experiment capsule. So, ooh, that was almost bad. All right, so the next step is to make sure you check your staging. I was almost about to ruin this mission, but we are going to stage off this capsule. And there we go. So that is away. And now we have just a little separation motor. That is what we are going to use to get this out of orbit. And because we have staged that off, we should now be light enough. I said we should be now light enough. We were light enough when I planned this mission originally, because this construct is exactly 150 kilograms, and I forgot that the sample weighs 10 kilograms. So, I have no way to shed weight. We have 3 hours of time before this mission fails completely. But if I come around to the other side, if we are completely static, we are not rotating in any way. If I get to the other side of Earth, I should be pointed retrograde, I think... Yep, and that is our only hope, that we get close enough to retrograde to be able to stage, because even science cores that don't have control are able to stage or activate stages. There you see that tantalizing retrograde marker. We have an hour and 45 minutes of time left. We are approaching... Okay, I think that is going to be good enough. Let us hope that I am right. All right, so all that there is to it is to fire the engine. Woo! We've got a bit of rotation, which is not fabulous, but we have got ourselves into a suborbital trajectory. Now, if I stage off this little separation motor and this decoupler, we have unlocked controls. Fantastic. All right, so let's pin ourselves to... Okay, I don't know why that was disabled, but I had to enable the RCS on here manually. It was not in my staging. So yeah, we are going to peg ourselves to our negative surface velocity. This thing has little nitrogen RCS thrusters built right into it, which is just fabulous. And we should, in theory, with the parachute armed, be able to follow this all the way down, and hopefully the heat shield will protect us and we will be able to get a whole bunch of science. All right, we are just now dipping into the Earth's atmosphere. We are coming down, and so far so good. We have good control. Because I've just kind of pegged MacJeb to do a thing, it actually maintains that control even after we have lost connection. We wouldn't be able to change anything now if I wanted to, but I don't think I need to. We should be able to follow this trajectory all the way down to the ground. We have just an hour left of electric charge, which means I planned these batteries perfectly. All right, we've got basically a nice gentle slope down into the Earth's atmosphere. It looks like we are going to be coming down basically on top of a ground station also, or at least just past it, which is pretty handy as well. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that this should work out. Now that I've said that out loud, the mission is probably going to fail. But yeah, so we're coming down. So the biosatellite experiment that I mentioned as being my inspiration was one that was launched in 1966. So we are 3 years ahead of that. And it contained fruit flies, parasitic wasps, flower beetles, and frog eggs with bacteria, amoeba, plants, fungi. So it had all sorts of biological experiments, which is kind of what I imagine that generic biological sample to be, just a big collection of life to see how they reacted to being in orbit. All right, so we are getting into the toasty part of re-entry, and we are dropping our speed pretty dramatically, and we have just like a nice shallow trajectory, so I am really confident that this is going to work out in our very first return from orbital velocity. Yeah, so we have no control, and we are getting close to 5 Gs, but we are held just perfectly dead center on our retrograde vector on surface velocity. So MacJeb is doing us a solid there. We are able to come right back in, and yeah, this was a really shallow trajectory that brought us in, and looks like we are going to in fact dunk in the water in about 1.5 minutes. Probably a lot longer than that, because that doesn't expect us to pull a parachute. All right, so we are coming out of the hot part of the re-entry, and hopefully everything on board survived. And now I think we can even turn off, well, not that we would have control to do so. Oh, maybe we would. Fascinating. Okay, good to know. I don't actually have signal, but I'm able to toggle different options on MacJeb, which I'm not 100% sure I'm supposed to be able to do that. But yeah, one way or the other, there's no reason not to keep this thing nice and stable as we come down. Yeah, so as I was saying before, oh, look at that shot. That's pretty fun. As I was saying before, I tried to construct basically this, where we have a control probe. We have a parachute. We have RCS. We have RCS tanks. We have electric charge. We have a capsule that is able to store science and a heat shield. Like all of this stuff, like the actual service module that you could build that would do all of these things is fairly large, I feel like, or if not large, it's very complicated and uses a bunch of parts. And yeah, as I was working on building that is when I found these parts. And it's like, oh, they just kind of did all the work for me. And it doesn't use procedural avionics, which is the gold standard for balance as far as control is concerned, but I'm super not worried about it. This is a very specific sort of this is a very specific build. And there we go. We are coming down at a nice 5 meters per second. There we see the moon through the clouds as the backdrop to our descent, with the first object that has reached orbital speed and will hopefully not explode on contact with the water. All right, 30 meters above the surface of the ocean, where a recovery vessel is waiting to pick it up just off screen. Sploosh! And there we go. We have done it. We have returned from orbit. The craft has survived re-entry and engineers are examining it very keenly indeed, which gets us just a ton of money. And then we have also gotten a whole bunch of science. So we got 10 science just for the privilege of returning a vessel from orbit, because that is indeed the very first time we've done that. We got a little bit of funds back from that, and then Kerbalism tells us we got 40 science returned from biological sample to Earth space low. Fantastic. So that's great. We have 70 science now and a whole bunch of funds that we can use to get the next couple pieces of our technology picture put together. So that means crew survivability. Basic capsules. Yes, we have done it. We have set up the unlock for our basic capsules. So probably in another year or two, we are going to be able to start our Mercury program, which I am beyond stoked about. We're not going to have to torture spaceplane pilots anymore, guys. All right, so let's take a look at what the next year of research holds for us. We have 1960 orbital rocketry coming right up. We have early human spaceflight material science after that. Then we're grabbing human-rated EDL, crew survivability, and basic capsules. So this is going to be the first couple of things that is going to give us some upgrades that we're able to do to existing launch vehicles. Then it's a straight shot on over the course of a full year to get to basic capsules. But we are going to be able to spend a little bit of this money, I think, on points in the meantime. Not sure how many points we're going to spend on that, but we got 4 free ones, which is great. So let's dump those 4 free ones that we got from science into science, which makes sense to me. And we'll spend 1, 2 on the vehicle assembly building because I like round numbers. So we're at 60 points in the VAB and 74 in research and development. And if you had told me that in just a short while after starting my lunar ambitions, I would go from like 10 points in the VAB to 60, I would not have believed you. I was not sure how people got that many points, but yeah, they start rolling in pretty fast when you get big contracts like this back to back and your launch vehicles start becoming reliable enough to handle them. So yeah, we are making excellent progress. I think I'm going to leave it there because we have some unlocks coming up. I already have the Titan boosters ready to be paid for and start tinkering with them. And once I get 1960 orbital rocketry, we are going to be doing a lot more design. So that may be something that I have to, spend a week tinkering on that. But yeah, so lots of exciting stuff to come. I'm going to save some money for this, so we're going to hoard like a little dragon for now. But yeah, really exciting things to come. All right, Future Justin here, tuning in to a NavSat launch in progress on a Thor-able rocket. We have staged off that booster and we are away. I wanted to kind of tune into this part of the footage because I I was trying to, skip ahead and not make you guys watch every little launch because there's a million tiny satellite contracts, but I was trying to figure out what I had done wrong with MechJeb here. Later on in the future, I've rebuilt this rocket from the ground up and it works a lot better, but I'm not sure what causes this issue here, where it's telling me converged optimizer iteration failed and it is now pointing me straight up, and I promise that is not where I actually want it to go. So I just kind of flip it around and I'm trying to salvage this launch by doing it manually. But anyways, back to old me for the actual launch. Alright, tuning in because there was indeed a couple of failures right in a row. So I had MechJeb fail on me, which was fun. So there's something wrong with my design here on the Navstar F payload that I was going to use to finish my fourth and final early navigation satellite contract. So yeah, something is wrong in my build that caused MechJeb to announce that a convergence failure had occurred and to point straight up and try to keep burning in that direction, which is obviously not super helpful. And then as I had disengaged the autopilot and I was trying to manually repair my orbit, and then my AJ-10 engine failed. I can't even remember which one this is at this point. Probably the 42. So yeah, that's big failure on that one, and I think it's finally time, because we are not far away from the 1960 orbital rocketry, which is going to have all sorts of upgrades that I'm super excited about. So the next one of these is probably going to be built on that infrastructure. So I guess we'll see about that. So yeah, that was the aborted attempt of the Navstar F to get into orbit. And indeed, we have unlocked 1960 orbital rocketry before I could build anything else. And so there is all sorts of cool stuff in this node. And I have spent the better part of the last week kind of going through the different combinations and testing things out and building rocket designs that I was happy with. So what we are going to need, I am going to skip a lot of the technology in this node. Notably, there is the Juno 4 upper stage and the X405H, which are both engines that were theoretical. I'm not sure that they ever actually flew. The Juno 4 came closest to being flown. Per this description here, you can see that it was chosen for the Atlas Vega launcher, which I didn't know anything about. I'd never heard of that until I got to these last couple of nodes in the RP-1 tech tree, which was a possible contender against the Atlas Agena, which we all know and love. So anyways, this was a upper stage that was intended to perform that same role, and same thing with the X405. They were both intended to be Vega stages for the Atlas Vega rocket, and neither of them ever flew. The Juno 4 was tested a bunch. I don't think the X405 ever was, but it's not super important because I'm not sure that we're going to use them. The designs that I've come up that use these are not any better than the ones that I have done with the latest AJ-10s, basically. So there's upgrades to the AJ-10 early, which make it just fantastic. The AJ-10 142 is just lovely and fantastic and efficient and doesn't fail quite as much, and that was used on the Thor Delta rocket, and so I have one of those all queued up and ready to go. The AJ-10 mid was also used on the first configuration of the AJ-10 series. Mid is the AJ-10 104, I believe, and that is the one that was the Able-Star part of the Thor Able-Star. But the really key thing here, unlimited ignitions. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about that. That is really going to change a lot of stuff. The what you can do with unlimited restarts in an upper stage is like borders on infinite. Like, there's just so much that you can do that I was not able to do before, because you used to have to develop every single boost stage for exactly one rocket. Now you can actually wrap more than one into the same stage. So that is going to be really interesting and central to a lot of design, but the first configuration of any engine is terrible. Or if not terrible, not nearly as usable and useful as it will be in the future. And that does not, that definitely holds true for the AJ10 mid. So it's not going to immediately replace everything that I have. I'm definitely going to be using the AJ10 142 on a lot of my engines, or a lot of my new rocket stages. Let's see, there's also upgrades to the LR-105, the LR-79, and the LR-89, which is just going to be really good efficiency and power for each of those. The LR-79 one is kind of fascinating. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the LR-105s are just straight up better as far as I can tell. And then a bunch of Russian engine upgrades that I'm not as concerned about. And the X405 gets both its own model, the X405H, and then I think the X405 from way back here also gets upgraded to the X405H. I guess so you could have a smaller model, question mark? It's not 100% clear. All right, something I also wanted to talk a little bit about is I gave KLV, Kerbal Launch Vehicles, another shot. And so I want to show you kind of what I've come up with. I've found a good workaround for the fact that the issue that I had, which was when you go to, I can't get to it from here, but when you go to edit a vehicle, it doesn't actually update the subassembly. It only updates the configuration file for KLV. So it doesn't actually update the parts when you click edit. It just updates the stuff that you put in here, which is annoying, but it's not that big of a deal if you know that that's the case, and you know that you have to update both the text file here and also the subassembly over in your subassemblies window. That makes it to be much less of a big deal. But yeah, I've tried to put everything into KLV, everything that I'm using, and the number of things that I'm using is actually up quite a bit now that I have 1960 orbital rocketry. So I've loaded up the Navstar F, the launch that just failed, which had indeed the AJ1042, which is not super great. But you'll notice I have not one but two different upgrades to the AJ10 early that are available to it. So what I'm going to do now is I can show you how lovely this is, and we can just pull off the full rocket. And this is the payload needed. It needs 60 units of navsat payload, no big deal. And I can tell it, like, well, I need to get into low Earth orbit, okay? And because I've set up these configurations, I see it gives me suggestions for both telerockets, and also basically everything I have can make this work, and also Thor rockets. And look at that, the Thor Able 3, that is the rocket that I've been using. Essentially, that was my Thor Able that I've been using up to this point, is the Thor Able 3 configuration. Which, as I've put in here, is using the MB3-1 configuration of the LR-79 rocket, and also, at least it should be using the AJ10-101A. That one wasn't. Like, that's an upgrade that I had available, but I didn't put in because I don't have a good reason, actually. I just hadn't bothered to upgrade it because I didn't think it was a big deal. And then it failed, so now I know better. But I have also put in some of the upgrades from 1960 orbital rocketry, such as the Thor Delta, which has updated numbers, and these numbers are just based on like very rough napkin math of like looking at Delta V numbers on here and like just scaling up some lead ballast. So I'm not taking these numbers all that seriously. But yeah, so this is the configuration that I have come up with for this, and that's a MB3-1, so the same one that we had before, and then the AJ10-142, which is the latest and greatest that we have. That also includes an Altair 248, which I'm finally getting the chance to use versus the GCRC, but I'm pretty sure we do not actually need that for this build. Like this particular mission is not going to need this part, so I can just throw that away, and that's not a big deal. So I'll do that, and I'm going to put just like 5% force because this thing just like sits on the Like I like to actually kick it off just a teensy tiny bit when we get that up into orbit. And yeah, so that uses the AJ-10-142, which I'm not sure I've purchased yet. So let me make sure I flip back and then flip forward to purchase that for 1,500 funds. So yeah, if we compare the AJ-1042 that I've been using before, it was 33 kilonewtons, 238 to 267 seconds specific impulse. This improves on that just a little bit, 1.25 extra kilonewtons, and like 3 seconds extra specific impulse, which is fine. That's lovely. Also, important to note that this had just about maxed out, or I think it probably had maxed out on data units. Nearly 10,000 and a flat 5% failure rate, which is not awesome, but flipping up to the 142 down to 2,000 data units, I still have 5% full burn. Goes from 5% down to 3% ignition failure rate, which means that this is going to get much lower, and I'm very excited about that. Maybe it won't fail so darn much. The AJ-10 early has been such a fantastic upper stage for me, but gosh, that reliability has been so bad. So anyways, that is what is used in the Delta upper stage. That's what differentiates the Thor Delta. The Thor Delta kind of ends the Thor line, at least as far as I'm going to be using it, and it marks kind of a transition point where it was called the Thor Delta, and then it becomes the Delta series of rockets, which has heritage all the way to today. So I'm pretty excited about that. You see, I also have the Thor Able Star here, which uses the restartable AJ-10 mid, which I'm pretty stoked about. But yeah, so I'm going to give KLV another shot. We'll see if this is any harder to manage than my my increasingly sprawling list of craft files. But yeah, I just want to keep things organized, neat and tidy, and if I can measure actual payload to orbit, that would be even better. Let's get this boxed up and ready to go so I don't fail that darn contract. And we're all tooled up because nothing has actually changed. We're using basically the same tankage as we did in the AJ-10-42. The fuel mix is the same and all of that. And so there we go. Let's go ahead and get that saved, and that will be not much different as far as build time. All right, this little beauty is the X6 that was designed by Frisbee Driver, once again a person off of the RP-1 Discord that posted this in the craft files, and I have since stolen it to use to complete a Supersonic contract. So we have Johnny Flores once again doing what he must, man of danger, ready to take off in a craft that I do not know how to fly. Ooh, that jumps right off the pad. Alright, yeah, so this gorgeous little thing is using one of the new turbojet engines that I've unlocked and never actually used. It's actually got just a ton of thrust. Like, I'm pretty sure that's actually higher than some of the XLR 11 configurations, for goodness sake. But, yeah, this is going to make doing the X-Plane contracts real easy. X-Planes were not just a series of, rocket planes that were used to jump out of orbit and lead directly into the manned spaceflight program. And, I mean, that's a big part of it. But there was also a whole series of experimental aircraft and rockets, all of which were used to test new technologies, new aerodynamic concepts, because they really didn't know about a lot of these things until they actually got out and tested them. And so you have things like this where we have to, go up and try out and see what the supersonic regime is like, how pilots react to that, to being at high G loads, at different atmospheric pressures, and all those sorts of things. Yeah, so we are just getting up to the floor of our mission profile here. So we are just going to start leveling off in a second, and this thing flies like an absolute dream. And just drop that down to horizontal, and just open up that throttle, and we should, in theory, really start rocketing pretty fast here, because the idea... Oops, we want to actually go... I'll make sure we're actually level. Staying level anyways. Yeah, because we need to get ourselves up to about 515 meters per second at this, roughly at this altitude. So I'll betcha that there's more that I could do with atmospheric autopilot. So let's see, we want to go about 550 meters per second. Turn on the speed control. We want to be level. We want our altitude to be 14,000, not 140,000. All right, and now we wait. All right, we have ticked over into the desired range of speed, and we are just waiting now. Oh, it's fascinating. It's kind of like fluttering the... Oh, yeah, no, I remember this behavior. Yeah, so it kind of flutters the throttle, atmospheric autopilot does, to make sure that we maintain the speed that I have requested that it hold us at. And this was a giant problem when it was, you know, a rocket plane that only had a limited number of ignitions, but because we're using a turbojet for this, it is not a problem at all. So yeah, now we just need to hold this heading and speed and everything else for another 2 minutes. 4 seconds to go. 1, and you are cleared to land. There we go. So we got, that's that one. Oh, we need to get home first. Ha, right. Yeah, so there we go. It's actually a little bit toasty up in the cockpit, but otherwise we should be doing just fine. So let's, how to do this safely. What I'd like to do is flip around, so let's... Whoa. Here we go, just hit that heading, turn off that speed control, and I will have the autopilot fly us back home. Look at that, look at this performance too. Look at this just whipping right around at altitude, maintaining our velocity and our... That's not quite where I wanted to go, I don't think. Hold on, where am I? Ah, not 180. It's 270, I think, is what I'm looking for. Oh, look at that. You can actually pick a target waypoint. So I'm going to just click. Oh, cool. Okay, so I was able to just click a waypoint to travel towards, and I picked right behind the Kennedy Space Center. And atmospheric autopilot is just going to fly me there. How cool is that? I've turned off the speed limiter, which may be a mistake as we are getting pretty toasty already. I think I'm going to put a limit on this at about 600 meters per second. There we go. That will hopefully keep us from exploding. And yeah, so should be probably slightly less than 3 minutes to get me all the way back. All right, we are just 60 kilometers out, and I think I'm ready to flip over to standard fly-by-wire at this point. Maybe? Okay, yeah, just got to turn off all the individual cruise flight controller thingers. But yeah, there we go. So let's go ahead and cut the throttle a bit and start heading and start making our descent. All right, so what I just did here is I've actually changed it so that I have a, it's moderating my angle of attack and G rating so that I can't like throw this into such a horrible turn that it destroys the craft. So we are flying overhead now and descending fairly slowly with the idea that I want to very carefully turn around so that I can make a landing, because I do not have a parachute on this, so I am operating without a safety net at this point. So I've turned on the nav HUD and I'm just going to kind of cycle around and come back. And like I said, the idea behind this is to make sure that I don't pull any maneuvers that would destroy my ship outright. Because that is something that I have trouble with, like, is making sure that I don't Like I understand exactly how to hold the throttle and that sort of thing. Because I just have not had too much experience with planes. Oh, and I have flaps now, so I can actually turn my flaps on to reduce my speed as I come around here. Although I may need to abort this particular attempt because we are coming in fast and from a very high altitude. So let's just plan on that now. And we'll just turn this around, which has the added benefit of cutting a bunch of speed. There we go. The brake's ready to go, and we are coming in for what is hopefully our final approach. There we go. Okay. And there we go. Touchdown. There we go. That worked out perfect. I love it. Easy, easy, easy with the turning there, buddy. Whoa, man. Whee! Oh no! No, no, no! Oh, come on! I was doing so well. That's what I get for touching anything. Oh, gosh. It wouldn't have been a flight with Johnny Flores, Man of Danger, without his motto. It could have been worse. What's that? 2 adventures with Johnny Flores right in a row. That's right, we have another X-15 that has been built, and you'll notice that this is looking very different indeed. So let's go ahead and flip on the fly-by-wire, fire up the engines, and get moving here. That's right, so I've finished up my next iteration on my X-15 craft, and this one works a little bit better. I was able to identify the biggest problem that I'd been having with my with this craft, and that was the way that it would, when I was running out of fuel, it would start to pitch over the top. That's because it was unbalanced, like a lot unbalanced, and obviously so when I actually thought about it. Because when this is in atmosphere, the absolute symmetry is not super critical to worry about. You generally have some asymmetry, like you have your stabilizers and things on the top of an aircraft and not necessarily underneath. Unless you're looking for particular aerodynamic properties, which we are not going to discuss here. When this leaves the part of the atmosphere where that lift is actually acting on it, then all that's left is that symmetry and the thrust of the engine coming out, and then it starts to pitch itself over. So that is what was happening there, and we could see that like at this point it would already have been starting to pitch over, and the RCS would have been firing hard to try to correct for that. All right, so we have a apogee of 137 kilometers, which should be just fine. We did that in a 45-degree-ish heading to make sure that we don't put on too much speed as we do this. So yeah, other than that, it should be fairly similar. The couple other changes that I made is I adjusted the positioning of the RCS to help balance the craft, and I also switched it to hydrazine because hydrazine is magical. So these are all firing hydrazine now. We have a big tank of hydrazine right here, which is just lovely, and keeps the mass a little bit forward, which is nice. Yeah, so hopefully this will be a more functional craft. I'm probably not going to try to take it suborbital all that much because even with this better functioning craft, getting this thing to survive suborbital reentry has been an absolute monster, and I just don't think that it's really worth doing. But the Supersonic X-Plane's high difficult contracts that slowly increase in rewards are definitely worth it, because this one is going to get me something like 84,000 funds total, just for flying a craft that I already had in the hangar. So that is pretty darn cool. We just need to get up a couple more meters, and there we go. So now we just need to get home safely. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to tip us down a little bit so that we are facing closer to our prograde vector. That should be better also for Johnny Flores to be able to lean out the window and take pictures. But what I've found is that it's helpful to be closer to your prograde vector to maintain control, rather than trying to pretend that you're going to be able to belly flop into the atmosphere and then it just burns up and tears itself apart because you swing wildly down. So anyways, just a little while longer until we get back down into the atmosphere. All right, we are dipping below 80,000 or 80,000 meters, and so I'm coming down pretty darn steeply. That was a pretty ballistic trajectory that I went on, so my plan when we get down into this atmosphere is to hopefully be able to control this, because like I said, when I've been pointing way away from the prograde vector, it ends up swinging my nose down whether I want to or not. And you'll see it does it a little bit here, but it won't do it hopefully as much as it would. See, we're already able to exert some control and pull up. And as lift begins to act on our wings, I'm hoping that we will be able to, you see that prograde vector is beginning to lift. A little bit of wobble as we really dig into it. And I think we are doing just fine. Yeah, so there we go. Now I'm going to be able to very easily glide this back home. Unfortunately, I seem to have misjudged the air launch distance a little bit, and we are still pretty darn far off of the coast of Florida. So we are flying on back, and at some point during this flight when we are coming in for a landing, that is when I will decouple this, this vertical stabilizer underneath. So that is going to have to be replaced for every flight, which is a little bit annoying, but not too abnormal for me and my piloting skills. All right, this X-15 glides like an absolute champion, which I am pretty thrilled about. So let's go ahead and get our wheels down, and I am going to separate this bottom stabilizer, which just drops straight off. Very nice. And I am trying to line up the runway here. Cut our speed a little bit, please and thank you. There we go. All right, and 3, 2, 1, let's pop those chutes. And I can turn off the autopilot. Woo! Oh man, that was quite the little flip. I guess we're pointing this way now. All right, but look at that. I actually got the angle just about right on these two parachutes. We got a little bit of fuel left in the tank, so we are leaning a little bit backwards, but it evenly draws, so that might not even be the issue. But anyways, it's close enough that I don't think it's going to strike the engine. But yeah, my cowardice pays off again, and we hopefully have a good landing here in 3, 2, 1. Kaboom! There we go. Wait, no kaboom. Absolutely no kaboom. Fabulous flight of the X-15, and that is basically the role that I am going to have this play from now on. I am hoping to do that, basically do that supersonic contract whenever it gets to be an actually good amount of money, because as you see, 42,000 for successful completion, and it was the same amount on advance, which is really nice, and I don't know why I would turn that down. So yeah, that's basically what I'm going to do. When I have the supersonic contract, I'm going to fly the X6. When I have the high contract, or X-Plane's high contract, then I'm going to be flying my X-15. And that's something that I don't know that you guys are going to need to watch. It's not going to be too much longer until we have manned capsules, but until then, that is a great little bit of extra cash. All right, so I think that is going to have to do it for us for this episode. We ended up just doing a lot of building, testing, and proving out these new vessels that we got with 1960 orbital rocketry. So yeah, there's a lot more work to be done with those in the future. That's one of the things that I really love about RP-1 is that there's a lot of things that kind of block you, like having limited number of ignitions and unreliable rockets and that sort of thing. But when you start to clear them, it really feels like progress, and it really feels like we are getting new things and getting things done, and it extends out the tech tree in a way that I don't feel like we get that experience in stock. So yeah, there's lots of really exciting new things that we're going to be able to do now that we have this technology, and our technology is proceeding much faster than it was. So we should be rolling out new things and trying new stuff all the time. All right, so if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Leave me a comment down in the comments below. Let me know what you thought, and I will see you next time.